Good morning, everyone. This is Kevin Robbins, CEO of Mid-Atlantic Employers Association. Thank you for joining us for our weekly webinar. You can see we've shifted our title to Recovery and Growth, although as we've seen in the kind of the world and the country in the last week, I'd say maybe it's stumble and growth, not recovery and growth. We're all still wrestling with the new dynamics, both from business as well as health. And for that reason, I think it's important that we're going to continue these for a while. At the end of the session today, Amy Kanji, who we all know is our expert, is going to update us on everything around COVID, but especially what to do with the state-specific quarantines that are coming into place. So very interested to hear about that. But the first half of these that we're going to do, that we've talked about, is really looking at that recovery and how do we, be sensitive and aware of where we're coming from, understanding where our employees are, and moving ahead and hopefully getting back to where we want to have growing, thriving, successful businesses and workforces. In addition to COVID, we, have been also kind of involved in the last month or so with some very strong social issues, and we're going to touch on the impact of those on the business side today with Sienna Williams, MEA's attorney, and Margaret Urick. So it's a great session. We're looking forward to it. Next slide. So before I turn over the reins, I have a couple of things we're going to talk about. Next Tuesday, same time, we will, in addition to doing the legal and compliance side, look at the impact of the new normal and compensation strategies. So again, like we've talked about, I think everybody has to assume something has to change in everything we do, whether it's hiring, onboarding, manager skills, and I think compensation is no different. We're very pleased to have our longtime partner, Compensation Resources, who works with hundreds of companies on compensation strategies, joining us next week. And then the following week, making Zoom 3D. I wish I could do that. I wish I could figure out how to do that. But, really we're looking at tips to manage virtual teams, and whether you're completely virtual or blended virtual, again, I think it's part of that new reality. And so our training team will be discussing things to do on a very practical level. You can now go online and register for the August sessions. We're still developing the topics for each one of those, but again, we will continue this at least through the rest of the summer, most likely. As long as there's something meaningful to talk about, we'll be here. So hope we can see you in the future. We are very excited to announce that we are beginning in-person training again August 5th. You'll see a picture. That's our actual training rooms. We're very fortunate because of the size of our facilities that every participant will have their own table that you can see they have their own sanitizer. We are following very strictly all the CDC requirements, masks and the like. So, safety is the number one thing. We want to make sure everybody feels comfortable, but a lot of people, I think, are looking forward to in-person live training again. So we've actually been going out and doing on-sites for the last couple of weeks. So we're really excited to open up the shop again. So you can see we're kind of bringing our most important programs in August: Team Lead Certification, our Foundation Leadership Series, which is 6 courses plus e-learning plus new coaching, stress management, and diversity, inclusion, and civility. So again, not everybody's ready, but a lot of people are. So we give you both options, the live online as well as in person, beginning in August. Okay, next slide. And we've added a third PSO roles and responsibilities after selling out the first 2. And again, as we've talked about in Pennsylvania, but I really think every company around the country should have a health and safety plan and designate a person with the responsibility. So this course is designed to inform, educate, and better equip the person that's designated with that. Like I said, I think we've trained 140 people already. We've added sessions and we'll continue to do so. So if you haven't taken this and you're the PSO, please consider signing up for the next session. Okay. So as always, at the end of this, we will email the presentation as well as the recording. There's also a piece on diversity inclusion that we just finished that will go out as well. If you have questions during the session today, please type them in the chat or Q&A, and we will get to as many as we can. We have a lot to cover, so we'll do the best we can. And as always, for members, this Tuesday events are now for members and non-members as part of our responsibility to help the entire regional business community, so we are making it open to anybody. But if you are a member and you have additional questions or want to speak in more detail, please give us a call or email us at the numbers listed below. Okay. Next slide. Is there any more? Okay, so we are going to talk about diversity and inclusion today. As we know, this is an important moment in time, and we are not covering all aspects of what's going on in our world, but it is important as employers to consider what it means to you and what to do about it. And we're very fortunate to have not only a wonderful lawyer, Sienna Williams, but also someone that's very passionate, as well as been doing this for years and years, starting with our harassment training and moving on. So we're very excited to have her, as well as Margaret, you're the head of our training and coaching, to lead us in that discussion, and then I'll turn over the reins to Amy after that. So, ladies.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Get my slides up. Can you see them? All right. Am I good, Margaret?
You're good.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning to talk about all the important topics we're talking about today, and specifically right now about diversity and inclusion. The idea here is to sort of review with you what our members are thinking about right now when it comes to diversity and inclusion, what they should be thinking about, and to really start helping you build a framework that you can use to understand this topic and use it and understand its significance when it comes to your business, both right now and in the near future, as you'll see some of the statistics about the workforce in general, where it is and where we're headed in this realm of diversity and inclusion. And a lot of what we're sharing with you today is guided by conversations that Margaret and I have had with members over the past several weeks. And there have been a few things that tend to pop up sort of recurringly, right? So a number of our members are saying, gee, we previously weren't focused on diversity and inclusion. What do we need to know about this, right? What should we be doing? Or we see other companies sort of issuing a statement or making a plan. What should we be doing? Some members have said, look, we tried diversity and inclusion initiatives in the past, and it was really hard to stick with it. We're not sure how to sort of embed these things and keep the progress moving forward. And then some have said, we're not sure what progress means in this area right now, right? Sort of what are the benchmarks for measuring progress? And is there even a way to measure progress, which by the way, there is. And we're gonna talk about that a bit today. And so we've really been helping members kind of answer those questions. And to do that, it's important to have sort of a starting understanding that we're talking about the same terms, right? So what does diversity and inclusion mean? Well, diversity is what we have in the workplace. Every workplace, every workforce has a certain level of diversity when it comes to their employees. It's the unique set of characteristics that they bring to the workplace. And it includes things that are sort of those legally protected characteristics like race, age, religion, but it also includes a myriad of characteristics. And we're going to take a glimpse at a wheel that we use, a diversity dimensions wheel, to understand that. But before we look at that, a diverse workforce, I just want to be clear, a diverse workforce sort of will reflect the diversity of the society in which that company operates. And more specifically and practically, within your company, it will reflect the diversity of the available qualified candidates. That's the idea, right? Sort of your workforce is reflecting the diversity of the candidates available in your region, and you're seeing that in your workforce. When it comes to those diversity dimensions, there are so many layers to a person, right? We can't possibly capture them in one visual, but this is a starting point, right? For kind of thinking about all the different aspects of diversity that an individual brings to your company. So at the core, they have, sort of each person's individual unique personality. Then we've got those internal dimensions, which tend to be those innate characteristics like race, gender, sexual orientation, age, physical ability. And then you've got external dimensions, right? Socioeconomic status, personal habits, recreational habits, marital status, family status, work experience, things along those lines. And then you've got organizational dimensions of diversity that you also want to be thinking about when you're talking about diversity, and that's work location, right? You may have some employees working remote, some in the office, sort of their authority within the company, the unit or department or group that they work with, and the list goes on. But this gives you an idea of, when we're talking about diversity, these are sort of those core characteristics, but there are multiple layers to this. And what is inclusion? Well, it's what we do with that diversity that exists in the workplace, right? And so it's how we make decisions more accurately, how we optimize our diverse workforce and decision-making in light of all those diverse characteristics, right? And inclusion, when you're creating an inclusive workplace, it's really creating a workplace where everyone feels comfortable bringing their best selves to work. So sort of more fully defined, inclusion is a cultural and environmental feeling of belonging, right? In inclusive workplaces, everyone's treated with respect. They have equal access to opportunities and resources. And that means that decisions about sort of giving input or ideas for a project, I mean, the whole gamut of decisions, right? Or who's going to manage a certain team or department, all of those things are ideally within a business being based on what will be the best contribution to the business, right? And that aligns precisely with these sort of diversity and inclusion efforts, because that's really what inclusion is about. It's about let's have everyone at the table and let's make decisions based on the best information or the best skill set. Let's select a person based on their actual contribution to work, kind of putting aside things that sometimes lead us astray. One of those things would be, for example, unconscious bias, right? That might lead us astray, and we might make decisions based on an assumption that's not actually correct. That just happens sort of without us even thinking about it. And we can make a better decision if we base that business decision on actual performance, actual skill, actual contribution to the business. We analogize it in trainings that we provide for employees this way. Diversity is like the mix. It's having the ingredients to make your cake. And inclusion is actually baking the cake, right? It's making that mix work and coming up with something that's even more amazing and more delicious than sort of the initial separate starting ingredients were alone and by themselves. Why are we talking about this now, right? So partly the why, the answer to the why requires us to take a look at some facts about today's workforce, right? So today in the United States, we have a very diverse workforce, and the trend is only for it to become more diverse, right? So it's only moving to a point of being even more diverse when it comes to sort of those traditional characteristics that we think about, like race, age, and sexual orientation. So for example, millennials, they make up a large part of our workforce now, but in 5 years, they're projected to make up 75% of the workforce. And they are literally the most diverse generation in the history of our country. So almost half of them, 44%, identify as non-white. And that's compared to baby boomers, where you had about 28% identifying as non-white. So you can see that's a significant jump. And then we sort of have the generations following the millennials that are just trending in that very same direction. Millennials are also the largest demographic of the growing and increasing population of LGBTQ workers, right? And millennials, they value diversity and inclusion in the workplace. They value it very strongly. They expect it, and they vote with their feet, right? So if they aren't seeing it, they're either not coming to an organization, or they're there for a little while and then they're moving on to their next best option where they feel that that company aligns with their values. And that's what we see in data surrounding recruiting and retention. So a company with a good diversity and inclusion program generally is going to fare better and get more bang for the buck in terms of the energy and the resources they put into recruiting and retaining employees. They're going to see higher levels of recruiting and retention when they have focused on diversity and inclusion efforts. And part of what's driving that is this significant percentage of millennials in the workforce. But also, people are working longer. So we also have more individuals age 65 and older still in the workforce. And I have to say, it becomes important for them too, to create an inclusive workplace, because there have been instances, and we've seen, and some of us maybe with our own experiences have seen, where older individuals aren't sort of given that respect within the workplace that they should receive, just like every person in the workforce should. So there are a number of factors in terms of the makeup of the workforce in the United States and the market of employees that kind of point to a need for employers to look at diversity and inclusion and whether they really are creating a workplace where all of those different employees feel comfortable bringing their best selves and their best ideas to your business. Also, why are we talking about this? We would be remiss if we didn't at least touch on the fact that the murder of George Floyd sort of sparked a lot of this conversation, a lot of renewed focus on this. And we've had a number of members say to us, look, we have employees who are very upset about what happened to George Floyd, and they are telling us, we expect you to do something. I mean, we literally have had members say they've got, 3 employees who are telling them, we expect you to do something. And we want to know what it is. And we want you to tell us, we want to hear this soon. But this is not something to sit on and wait on. And just for an understanding of demographics, these are not just racial minority employees. These are, sort of white or Caucasian employees as well, who are very touched and upset by what happened and feel strongly that someone should do something. And in a way, I say to employers, you should sort of, in a way, appreciate that they look to their employer as sort of that type of leader in society, right? To be able to, like, you can fix this, right? They're thinking, you can fix this and resolve it. But then as Margaret and I sort of have been guiding employers along this route, it's important to remember sort of an employer's role in society, right? And really look at what is your area that you can impact, right? While operating your business, right? If you're not already a social justice organization, it doesn't mean you have to change your business to become one. Certainly that's an option if that's what someone wants to do. But most businesses are going to continue to provide their same products and services. But within that, how can they sort of help show their employees, look, we understand this is really important and we're committed to it. And within our world, which is sort of the workforce, right? We are making the efforts that we can that align with that, right? So we've gotten the question. So after what happened to George Floyd, we have members asking us, should we make a statement? Should we do something? What should we do? How can we make a difference, right? How can we make sure our employees know that we're committed? And I think looking at your diversity and inclusion efforts within your company and your workforce is one of the biggest ways you can have that impact, right?
All right. So so as Sienna has alluded to, we have been working with our members around this for the past several weeks, several months, I guess, at this point. And what we're finding as we work with our members, like many employers, are really finding that there's these 5 steps that you want to be taking as you work to do something in this area. So first, it's like, let's just commit to doing something. So we're getting involved with our members now who are saying, what do we do? Like something's happened. We want to address it. We're not sure what to do. So the first is really, let's make that commitment that you want to do something, that you want to look at your diversity and your inclusion. And then the next step really is to listen and to learn, right? To do your research, to understand what you don't understand, to look both internally and externally with that research that you're doing. What's currently exists in your organization? Where are your D&I initiatives now? Who do you employ? And then also do your external research and really understand what's been going on so that you can make very informed decisions on how you do want to move forward. And then once you've done that research, and part of the research is also looking at, what are the opportunities that exist for your organization? And Sienna's already alluded to some of that already. But the more that you create a diverse organization, the more opportunities you have. I mean, the studies are out there that support increased engagement with your employees, better performance, the opportunity for more creative ideas, right? More innovation, because you're involving the thoughts, the ideas, the knowledge from a more diverse group. And then obviously there's the issue Sienna alluded to with the millennials and your ability just to attract and engage, right? Keep that talent that is going to be such a vital part of the workforce moving forward. So that's all part of the listening and the learning. Once you've done that and you know how you want to move forward, right? Because you've got the information that you need, then you want to go ahead and create that plan. And then once you have that plan, you want to communicate that plan back out to your employees. Right. So Sienna was talking about what's the message and talking to your employees, and yes, and we're going to look at this in the next slide, but you do want to have a message that you put out to your employees. But you want to keep talking to your employees, and you certainly want to share with them what are the steps that you're going to take, right? What is that action that you're really now committing to doing? So there's almost like this recommitment that's going to happen on your part. And it's to take that action. And then once you take the action, now you want to go ahead and measure what you're doing. It's like anything else you do in business, right? You want to measure the results of the actions that you're taking, and then you want to recalibrate where necessary. So like I said, as we talk with our members, as we look at what other employers are doing, it's really these 5 steps create a nice framework for you to follow as you think about how to move forward with this. So Sienna, can you go to the next slide for me, please? So as we said, we've been talking to our members, and we have found a couple common questions that keep coming up with our members, and Sienna's already alluded to it. And it's this, should I make a statement? Like, what should I, and if so, what do I say? So first of all, our response has always been to our members, yes. If you feel like you want to make a statement, do so, but make sure that you're authentic with what you say. Make sure that you're genuine with what you say. This is an area that has been offering support in helping our members craft that statement, right? What should it look like, and what's going to be important for them to say? And that is a question, right? What do we say? And what we're saying is, say what's true for you, say what you want to be true for your organization, reassure your employees with this message that it is a safe and respectful workplace. And if you do know what you're going to be doing, the actions that you're going to be taking, then share that. Even if the action is, I'm just going to listen and learn right now. Let your employees know what you're doing, right? How you say it, again, right? You want to say it in a very authentic way. You want it to be very genuine. You want to be sincere with it. How you communicate it, whether it's in writing or personally, that it will depend on, I think, what's really normal for you within your organization. What are your people used to with you? And again, what's going to be the most authentic way for you to do it? The when part, it's when you're ready, right? When you feel like you understand and you're clear on what you want your message to be, and you can deliver it in that way that is going to be very authentic and very genuine, then that's when you do it, and not before you're able to do that. The who should say it is a really important question. It's one that we've gotten from a lot of people that we've talked to. And this really is going to be different for each organization, because it's really going to depend on how your organization is structured and how large your organization is. But really what we're finding is that the employees want to hear from their leadership. So whoever that might be. If you're a very large organization or on the larger side, and you have several layers of leadership, then the employees are going to hear from all of their leaders. They want to know how their leaders feel with regards to this. If you're smaller, then a message from the CEO might be enough. But it's really the employees want to know how their leadership team feels. So really thinking about who makes up your leadership team, and who are, and that will help you decide who are those people that really needing to be communicating and putting a statement out there about how they feel in this space. All right, Sienna, next slide. So the other question that we got that was actually submitted in advance of today's webinar was, should we start a diversity committee or a diversity council? Great question. Absolutely something that should be and can be considered by everybody. A couple things to think about. And like anything else that you do when you're going to create something new, you want to, fully commit to doing it. You do want to make sure that whatever you create, it does really align with your business strategies. You want to look at it, and you want to make sure that whatever this is working on, right, these D&I practices can be embedded, right, that this committee is being set up to be successful. You want there to be some governance for this committee, right, and some oversight for what is happening within the committee. Again, you want to set it up for success, so you want to make sure this committee does have some authority. And it really should be, often the successful committees we're finding are chaired by the CEO or at a minimum, the CEO is very influential in this committee, is a big part of this committee. Any change that's going to happen within your organization, you always need leadership to buy in. So something as important as the diversity committee or diversity council, having the CEO and some other top leaders involved will be very important. Deanna, next slide. All right, so just a couple tips we wanted to share with you. And again, I'll start with that: be genuine and be authentic. We really can't say that enough. That's so important with anything that you're going to do, especially as you start in this space. Sienna mentioned earlier, you do really want to be mindful that you remember your role as an employer and as a company. You don't want to, turn yourself into a social activist company, as Sienna said. It's really, remember who you are, remember the space that you're in, and then look there to see how can you bring about and increase your D&I efforts. So with that comes the really being mindful of your purpose and your audience. And this is where you really want to, this comes from also doing that listening and that learning, doing that research, understanding who you are, where you're at, what you want to do. And then key to all of this, because it's going to be a part of it, is being really comfortable with the uncomfortable. Because for many people, it's going to be uncomfortable for a little while as we get started. So you just have to get comfortable with that and talk about that and find a way of allowing everybody to be able to talk about that. So next slide, Tiana. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Margaret. And just to tack on to what Margaret had said, talking about race, right? Or talking about, how people, stereotypes they have of older people, or biases they may have about someone based on their sexual orientation. These are topics that can be uncomfortable at times. That generation that's sort of going to make up 75% of the workforce, or the exact stat is earlier in my slides, they are very comfortable with what many of us sort of prior to this have viewed as the uncomfortable, right? Those topics that we sort of didn't talk about at the Thanksgiving table, right? They are much more comfortable, and they actually have an expectation that it will be discussed. So we just kind of want to introduce employers to that notion of becoming a little more comfortable with what maybe in the past might have been an uncomfortable topic. But yeah, and we provide support for our members, and we're happy to support you with whatever point you're at in this process of thinking about diversity and inclusion. We're there to kind of help you and give you those tools that you need to take the actions that you're looking to take. So we're doing our part in the listen and learn, right? We've had a town hall that was really a listen and learn to hear from individuals who've experienced some of sort of racism or barriers in the workplace. We have a learning piece coming out. I really recommend you take a look at that. We should be circulating that soon. We provide anti-harassment training. This is a must, right? It's sort of the legal baseline for compliance, but also for a respectful workplace. It's the baseline, right? These are the standards that may not be crossed, because then they're violating the law. But we also provide diversity and inclusion trainings, and we have unconscious bias trainings and trainings for employees on a respectful workplace. And again, we parse it out into these two different, these are sort of companion trainings. The unconscious bias training is geared towards managers because it really explores more deeply sort of, look, in the hiring process or promotion process, what are we really thinking about? And are our decisions being affected by unconscious biases? This is not something that employees necessarily need to know at that deep level, or with respect to those processes that they're not really managing, right? And so we provide a separate training for employees, and that's on respectful workplace conduct. We provide them with a red light, yellow light, green light framework for talking about conduct in the workplace that may cross the lines of respect. And I mean, that framework can be used across the board, not just for issues related to these sort of diverse characteristics, right? The example I give is, you may have an employee who sort of, when we were all in the physical workspace, was having some super loud conversation on their cell phone, interfering with other people's ability to kind of concentrate on their work. That doesn't violate the law. It may not violate an explicit policy, but that is some yellow light behavior, right? So it kind of gives employees that framework to say, hey, whoa, yellow light conversation happening. Could you take that elsewhere? Even if they're doing it in a joking way, it can be very effective. So we review that tool and others just to help employees understand how to create a respectful work environment. And we do an introduction to unconscious bias for them as well, but it's more centered around employees. So we're saying, look at the group that you work with, look at the group that you by choice work with, right? Or by choice spend time with at work, like who you eat lunch with, who you say hello to. Just getting back to some of the basics and reminding employees and giving them a chance to reflect on that.
Yeah, so, yep. So, you know, when you think about those 5 steps that I talked about a moment ago, that take action often will involve some type of training. This is what can raise that awareness for all of your employees and allow you to really move in the direction that you want to move. Because for a lot of your employees, they need this opportunity to listen and to learn as well. And you can really facilitate that opportunity through some of these training sessions. There's also, you know, the facilitated discussions that we're having. You know, a lot of our members are asking for us to come in and help them facilitate these discussions. They know there are people want to talk about it. They know they want to have these conversations, and they feel that it would be best if there was somebody else to help support those conversations. The facilitated discussion is a great add-on to the trainings as well, right? The trainings that we offer is the opportunity to raise that awareness, and now let's talk about it. So that's where those facilitated discussions can really come into play. The mentoring programs, hopefully most of you were able to be on that town hall that Sienna alluded to that we did several weeks ago, that I had the opportunity to moderate. And if you were, you heard from both Emeka and Felicia how powerful mentoring really can be, and the opportunities that mentoring can give both the mentor and the mentee. So this is something that we're committed to doing, and it's working with our members to create mentoring programs within their organization. And there's a lot of benefits for doing so, but certainly also within this D&I space, this is a great way to really commit to something to see progress in your organization. Coaching is also an opportunity. One-on-one coaching, group coaching can also help in this space. And then the 5th step we talked about, right, was measure and recalibrate. So MEA has had for a long while the ability to support you with doing engagement surveys. And engagement surveys, when done on a regular basis, are a great way to measure how well those initiatives that you're taking with your employees, right, how well is it working? So we've just added to our engagement surveys a D&I section that will help you to measure where you're at, and then you are able to do it again after taking some action, right, to see how is that working for you. So that is something that we're rolling out now as well to support all our members as they think about moving forward with D&I initiatives. So I know we're pretty much at time with that. Sienna, did you want to wrap up with anything?
No, I just wanted to thank everyone for listening and learning with us, right? Thank you for taking this half hour to listen and learn with us on this topic, and we'll turn it over to Amy.
Yeah, we will be here, so if you do have any questions, feel free to add them in the Q&A. We can respond as Amy's sharing all of her great information with you.
All right, thank you guys so much. That was great.
Thank you.
So I'm going to do a short legal update. As Kevin alluded to at the beginning of the webinar, we are still in green in Pennsylvania, but if you're watching what's going on in the rest of the country, there's been some rollback with regard to how open things are. We see in the Southeast and in the Southwest, we see bars and restaurants that previously were opened are now closing. We see some businesses shutting down, so hopefully we don't get there. For now, we are green in Pennsylvania, just about everywhere in Pennsylvania, but I emphasize, I've said this for how many weeks now, green does not mean go, right? Even though we get more freedoms in green, there still are a number of restrictions on businesses. Telework still should continue where it's feasible. There still are safety orders in place that businesses should be meeting, and everybody's favorite masks are still required. We did PSO training yesterday, and Aaron Rinza from CMI mentioned the phrase universal masking. And that's where we're at in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Everybody still should be wearing masks, and we'll talk about that a little bit. One of the biggest changes in the green phase was how many people you could have at a gathering. Okay, the number is now 250, but that does not mean that we go back to our old ways of having large meetings or having large gatherings. It means we can have 250 people, but we still need to maintain our 6 feet social distancing. So for example, I went out last week, actually did my first live anti-harassment training and a member, which was really nice to get out. But we had to get very creative about how we did that in the space that we used for it. We ended up doing it in a warehouse. So we were technically outside, even though we were under covering, but we all were 6 feet apart. We had fans, everybody wore masks, and we were able to maintain our social distancing. So still not going back to where we were, but still better than where we were before, right? So masks, face coverings. Yes, they are still required. And yes, I think they will be required for the foreseeable future. They are required if you're outdoors and social distancing is not possible. They are required if you're indoors, where members of the public are generally permitted. They are required whether you're waiting for or getting on public transportation. And with regard to the working world, if you're working with the public, in food prep or packaging, if you're walking through common areas of any building, and you're interacting with other people where social distancing is not possible, masks are still necessary. If you are sitting in a private office with walls, you can take your mask off, but have it at the ready in case someone comes to your door, in case you have to get up and walk around. If you're in a cubicle that does not actually have walls, you still should be wearing your mask at your workspace. What are the exceptions? Well, there's a safety exception. We actually talked about this on our PSO training yesterday. It's been very hot and very humid for the past month or so. So if you have employees who are working outside, for example, and we might get to the point where it is not safe for them to be having a mask on at all times, you need to weigh the COVID safety against all other types of safety. And hopefully you have safety guidelines, you have a safety officer who could speak to this issue, but there are OSHA guidelines around that issue as well. So keep in mind safety. You don't want to be putting someone in a mask if it's otherwise not safe for them to do so. Reasonable accommodation. You have an employee who has asthma, you have an employee who has anxiety, and they come to you and say, just can't breathe with that mask on. Reasonable accommodation is like anything else from the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's an individualized process. You engage in an interactive process with that individual. That can include asking for medical information. At the end of the day, what you're looking at is whether or not the granting of the reasonable accommodation is undue burden. And in this case, the undue burden would be potentially exposing an unsafe person to the workplace. So you really need to make this on a case-by-case basis. Rather than not wearing the mask, is there another reasonable accommodation you can come up with? Maybe have someone work from home. Maybe have someone work in a very isolated part of the building. If you're under 2 years of age or you can't remove the face covering without assistance, you do not need to wear a face covering. And also for the hearing impaired, I have seen some face coverings. I'm sure you've all seen them too with the clear plastic that allows people to better communicate if they use lip reading. But those are some of the exceptions. So this is really the big question that we've been getting over the last couple of weeks. All right, what do we do about travel? Okay, so I'm going to break this into two categories. First one, let's talk about business travel. Okay, as the employer, you remain responsible for providing a safe work environment. That does not matter if it's in your physical location or if you're sending an employee out to a customer. So if you are going to send your employees out to customers, where are they going? Okay, how are they getting there? You know, a 90-minute car ride with no stops is going to be much safer than any plane ride whatsoever. My recommendation, and I'm the pandemic safety officer for MEA, so if we are now sending people out on public trainings or out on on-site trainings to members, one of the conversations we have every time is I reach out to the member and say, okay, what kind of safety precautions do you have in place? Are you using masks? Are you doing social distancing? How are you going to do the mechanics of the training to make sure that not only your employees are safe, but our employee that we're sending out is safe? So I recommend you have those conversations with your customers. What are they doing around safety? And then what if the employee doesn't feel comfortable going just because of a generalized fear? Or what if they have an underlying condition that makes them more susceptible to COVID-19? Well, if they have the underlying condition, no travel might be a reasonable accommodation. Again, individualized process. You go back and forth with them and exchange information and decide maybe we shouldn't be traveling right now. Or if they just have a general feeling of not being comfortable, keep in mind that raising a reasonable safety concern is protected activity under OSHA, and you can't retaliate against the individual for doing so. So again, you need to figure out, is the safety concern reasonable? You know, having those conversations with your customer, what are they doing around safety? Are they doing everything they can be doing? If your employee still doesn't feel comfortable, maybe you as an employer, this is one time to, you know, this is an environment in which we should try to be as flexible as we can with everybody. Keep in mind that if we're not doing what we should be doing as employers around safety, we're going to have employees leave. And even though we're in a high unemployment situation, you think, oh, it might be easy to replace that person. It's always difficult to have turnover. It's always difficult to train a new employee. If we have good employees, we should be doing everything we can to keep them. And now the really big question, okay? I can't tell you how many inquiries we've gotten over this in the past couple of weeks. Personal travel. So several states, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, have issued guidance regarding quarantines upon returning from hotspot states. Included on that list right now is Delaware, which makes things really interesting, and I'll talk about that in a second. But if you have employees who are planning mostly to go south to Florida, to the Carolinas for their vacation, it may very well be that they're under a guidance in Pennsylvania or New Jersey that they should be quarantining upon their return. So this is one of the things that makes it a little bit comfortable, a little bit difficult, and a little bit more comfortable for the employer, because these, generally speaking, are not orders. They're not self-quarantine orders. They're guidances, they're suggestions. And so I still think as an employer, again, we are required to provide a safe workplace for our employees. We should be enforcing this. We should be monitoring. I've had several members send out in the last couple of weeks, send out a new policy. If you're traveling to any one of these states, you need to let us know, and we're going to have a conversation around quarantining when you get back. Does FFCRA apply? Not 100% clear. Generally speaking, FFCRA, Families First Coronavirus Response Act, that leave time only applies if someone is quarantining under an order. Again, these do not appear to be orders. So it's not 100% clear if FFCRA applies. Unemployment may apply, however. If the person's out for 2 weeks and not getting paid, it's possible that unemployment compensation will step in. And if those are not options, if it's not FFCRA, if it's not unemployment, do we have to pay them? I think as employers, we should be thinking about this now, if you haven't thought about it already. Put the directive out to your employees, put the policy out to your employees. Tell them if you're not going to pay them, you're not going to pay them, so they can make a choice whether or not that vacation is worth it to them. And remember, if we're talking about paid versus unpaid, if you've got an exempt employee, their wage and hour issues are a little bit different than a non-exempt employee. A non-exempt employee doesn't have to get paid for hours not worked. An exempt employee has to get paid for any work week in which they perform any work. So again, it may be that during the quarantine, you can have somebody working from home. That's great. It may be that they want to use PTO, but you really need to, if you haven't thought through these issues, think through them now before the remainder of your workforce goes on vacation. I think as employers, we want our employees to be taking time off, right? Both because we want those PTO balances not to look so huge at the end of the year, but also because we've all been working hard and it's been a stressful time, and I think it's really good for our employees to be taking that time off. Okay, so I don't know if you had any specific questions.
There's a couple here.
Okay.
Amy, there's one which I have not seen this one yet. So a friend of a friend says her company's not requiring employees or visitors to wear masks, and no one wears them, so they're in violation of the order from the Department of Health. What could they do about that?
I mean, they can do a few different things. One of them would be to go out there and get that universal masking information off the internet and bring it to the employer. I would always want as an employer for my employees to come to me first, right? And have a reasonable conversation about, hey, we should be doing this. Why aren't we doing this?
Hello?
Am I still there? I think
Now I
lost
hear you.
my...
Yeah, I didn't hear you for a second. Now I hear you.
Okay. All right. Can you still see my slides?
No, that's okay. I think it's
okay. All right. I think I came off the Zoom, but I can still hear me through my phone. So I would give the employer the opportunity to fix the problem first. Go to them. But yes, there is a way to complain to the Department of Health, to the State Department of Health, and let them know that there is a concern. You can do it anonymously. I view that as a last resort. Give your employer, it's just like harassment. Please give your employer the opportunity to correct the problem before you go to the government and let them know what's going on.
okay.
And I did see another question before I got kicked off, and I promised I would address this, and I didn't. We have members who, especially who are down in the southern border with Delaware, and so they have workers coming from Delaware. on a daily basis. What do you do about those? There's actually an FAQ on the Department of Health's website that addresses this issue. It looks like you're okay as an employee to come across the border, go to work, and go home. You're not going to be required to quarantine, but the state would prefer that you not come in and do a lot of recreational activities and be going out to restaurants. Come to work, do your work, and go home.
Great.
Anything else, Kevin?
Yeah, there was a question about the what is the CDC's guidance on shields versus masks? Someone thought they heard that it was they were acceptable instead of a mask. I'm not familiar with them.
Yeah, I think it's pretty case-by-case basis. This came up during our PSO training, which we held yesterday, and this is the kind of situation where if you have an employee who cannot wear a mask for some reason, you might want to think about the face shield as a replacement, but I would really get a safety professional involved in that discussion. The face shields do not work nearly as well as the masks do with regard to keeping, the idea behind the mask obviously is my mask protects me, your mask protects, or my mask protects you, your mask protects me. The face shield just doesn't do as good a job as that because it's not holding in the germs because there's so much space for them to get out. So if you really have a consideration of that for safety reasons, your employees you don't feel should be in masks and you want to use the face shield as an alternative, I would get a safety expert involved with that, or the MEA's partner is CMI, and they can certainly consult on that issue.
Okay. Someone asked if we had a sample of a quarantine policy following personal travel. I don't know, do we?
Yeah, I have not done a sample yet, but I have helped members craft them. So what I would say is if you are a member, go ahead and put one together yourself. And if you want to send it to Hotline or send it to me, A. McAndrew at meainfo.org, happy to look at it. We could take a look at that for you as part of membership.
Someone asked about the outside the country for personal. It's probably very similar in terms of what, the quarantine guidelines.
Yeah, you need to look at what Department of Health is doing, either on a state level or federal level. CDC is saying, Department of State is saying. The real difference is it an order or is it a guidance? And that will guide you as to whether or not FFCRA is involved. But as an employer, like I said, you have the obligation to provide a safe workplace. So I would definitely be monitoring travel at this point and having people quarantine when they come home.
Okay, one final question. I'm going to read it to you because make sure I get it right. The current CDC guidance suggests that employees with a known exposure, so I guess that means they've been exposed to someone, but they're not yet positive, can report to work if they take their temperature, self-monitor, and wear a mask. This contradicts the new state advisory to stay home for 2 weeks if traveling to a hotspot. How does an employer reconcile those two?
I mean, I think as an employer, the safest thing to do is to do the more restrictive thing. Again, there's so many reasons why we follow all these guidances, right? One is obviously to keep our employees safe, to prevent the spread, to keep the public safe. But the other one is a liability issue. I mean, let's face it, employers are getting sued left and right over this stuff already, if you're reading this in the news. So we want to say, if we have an employee sue us, or we have a member of the public sue us, we want to say, look at all these things we did to keep our employees and keep the public safe. So we had a plan, we did training on the plan, we followed the most restrictive guidelines that we could follow to keep our employees and the public safe. So I would do the more restrictive thing if given a choice.
Right. And when we talk about the 2 weeks, and maybe I'm remembering what some of the sports groups are doing, are you able to shorten that time period by having like two negative tests after a period of time?
There's nothing explicit in the Pennsylvania or New Jersey guidances that say that. And I think the problem with that, you talk about the NBA or Major League Baseball, they have so much better access to testing than the general public does. And if you're not getting a rapid test, you may take a test and not get a response for 5 days. So while that may work theoretically, it's probably not going to work on a practical basis.
At this time, based on the timing of tests, okay.
Right, and based on the availability of testing.
Yeah. There's a question that says, where is the Delaware exception? I don't see it on the FAQ on DOH.
I was on the DOH's website this weekend in response to a particular member's question. They do have an FAQ section. Maybe I can see if I can find it, and we can send it out with the email that goes out this afternoon or tomorrow. the
Okay.
follow-up email to this webinar.
Okay, and then someone asked the question, which sadly I probably know the answer. If you're moving your child back to college in the next couple of weeks in a state that's a hotspot, unfortunately, that same quarantine is probably going to apply.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea. So try to make your arrangements now.
So sorry, some of these answers aren't great ones, but as Amy said, it's it's a very unusual and fast changing time right now. So we really have to keep aware of what week by week. And as I said, we will kind of make this part of our weekly to kind of keep you updated on the current thinking on things. In terms of rapid testing, I saw the one more question. I think it's not there yet. If we hear anything further on that, we'll let you know, and probably in a couple of weeks we'll ask one of our members who their organization does a lot of the lab testing protocols to join us again. I do know at this point that's not something that's coming very quickly. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us.
All right, have a good day, everybody. Take care. Stay healthy.